Hi, this is Lewis Harrison of Ask Lewis Harrison. That is our channel here where we do our podcast on personal growth, human potential, and applied game theory. I hope you will subscribe here to our channel and also go to Ask Lewis, which is our fan page over on Facebook, and give us a like. And of course, you can become my friend on Facebook. My name is Lewis Harrison. I'm an independent scholar and an applied game theorist. I teach people how to strategize to make their lives more effective, more efficient, more precise, more productive, and to help them become more self-aware. And we also have a daily blog that we do at AskLewis.com, and you can get on our regular mailing list. You get coupons and discounts and things like that. So game theory is what we talk about here. And game theory has won almost 50% of all the Nobel Prizes in the last 30 years. And game theory was developed by someone named John von Neumann, and his work essentially, was exploring how human beings rationally behave when interacting in an environment with other human beings. So obviously in baseball or football or basketball, you're doing that all the time. But in your life, when you go to the bank, when you go to the post office, when you get invited to a party, when you have social relationships, when you're trying to meet someone for romantic interactions, these are all also part of applied game theory. And that's what we address here in these particular blogs. So in this particular blog, what we're doing is really going back to basics. Because you can study game theory from a mathematical perspective, or evolutionary biology, or environmental psychology, or behavioral economics, really sophisticated stuff. But basically, you can watch a child play in a sandbox, or watch someone play chess, or someone play video games, or watch someone in the stock exchange, and learn a lot about game-based thinking and how people do play games. But a critical factor in most games, and also puzzles, by the way, are that they usually involve more than one player. So, for instance, when you play chess, the stock market, or search for a life partner, there are usually at least two or more players. In Scrabble or in the adult world of dating, there are many players as well. So gameplay, and that's the term that I use for all game interactions, gameplay, is built on patterns, a thing or an event that is repeatedly predictable. For instance, in the game of checkers, there's a geometric pattern to the board and the pieces and how the game is played. And in most games, there are patterns for keeping track of the process that's taking place, including scoring, points, innings, periods, etc. So the most skilled players in any game of puzzle are likely to have the ability to recognize subtle patterns that a less skilled or less experienced player may not have the ability to recognize. This is especially so in a game like chess or a game like poker. Clearly, everything we can experience in daily life, including and beyond recreational games and puzzles, will have a particular order or pattern. Some patterns are basic and straightforward. For example, when you explain to a child that your parents or guardians go to work or buy food at the store, they're really expressing patterns. By going to work, they can earn money. That's a pattern. And then they use that money to buy food and clothes and toys and games and other essential things. That is a pattern or a series of patterns as well. So as children develop more complex thinking abilities, they will often become more skilled at recognizing the logic-based patterns that we call inductive and deductive reasoning. And this makes it easy for them to strategize in games and solve puzzles, especially competitive ones. Over time, children begin to create an intuitive sort of mental playbook. And here they can look forward and predict which choices will help them to win a game or solve a puzzle. Of course, with deductive reasoning, you're deducing, you're gathering facts and coming to a conclusion based on the gathering of those facts. And normally the prediction will be pretty solid and pretty accurate. Inductive reasoning is a little less, because I always like to use this example for inductive reasoning. You see a creature and it looks like a dog. It barks like a dog. It wags its tail like a dog. It has fur. It has fleas. But you don't see it poo and you don't see it eat. So you can induce from what you're watching that if it makes a barking noise, there's a good chance it's a dog, but it may not be a dog. You're inducing it. So inductive reasoning is really less accurate than deductive reasoning. And of course, nothing's really ever 100%. Things look 100%, but they very often are not. So what happens is ultimately the most successful game-based strategists, or I call gamer psychologists, understand logic, rationality, and intuition. And these strategists usually develop an effective patterns from engaging in various recreational games. So most recreational games have more than one player. When you play chess or ping pong, there are usually two players. In sporting games like football, there may be many players. In the life game that we call the social network, there may be millions of players. In many sport games, such as soccer or American football, players may be divided into two teams, and in some sports there are more than two teams. Whether competing in a two-player game, a team sport, or in the game of life, players must learn the rules, boundaries, and controls of a given game. Mastering all of this may be very easy or can be highly demanding. For example, the structural rules of checkers or tic-tac-toe are easy to learn, whereas the structural rules of chess or the Chinese game of Go involve a much higher level of difficulty. Learning the processes in gamer thinking and gamer psychology, especially for those seeking to succeed and prosper in the game of life, requires many different and diverse thinking processes. Just think about the difference between going to a party and trying to meet an attractive person as opposed to simply playing checkers. Lastly, unless you have a really strong strategy, winning at checkers is probably going to be easier. Or at least you'll come out to a draw most of the time. So most games, for instance, require a great deal of skill and focus from a player or team. And contrary to common widespread perception that games provide instant gratification, often games delay gratification far longer than other forms of entertainment. So, often we do not even recognize or even notice these challenges and obstacles because they are or seem small or seem insignificant. Also, when they are more prominent, we may still not know these patterns, and as such, we are unable to get what we want or need. Now, I'm going to plant a sentence or a phrase in your mind now. Just remember it, and that is the theory of constraints, or Goldrate's theory of constraints. And that is when there's a factor that is so small but is so essential to a system that the system actually cannot achieve its potential. If you have a strategy, the strategy cannot achieve its potential because of some limitation created by constraint. Many people who are game and master game strategists are masters of the theory of constraints. They can see subtle obstacles that no one else can see. So as I said before, often we do not recognize or even notice challenges and obstacles because they are or seem small or insignificant. And also when they are more prominent, we still may not notice the patterns. So these kind of scenarios can cause great unnecessary struggle. Often if small problems are not addressed early, they may expand rapidly and become great problems. Like a small insect landing on a pond, the problem ripples outward and expands, creating greater complications. I call these patterns of seemingly insignificant challenges and obstacles constraints, which I had just mentioned. And many game theorists study these patterns through the theory of constraints. It would be great if most problems could be solved with common sense, a smile, and maybe a happy disposition. But sadly, the world just doesn't work that way. Some people have great attitudes and are highly motivated and even inspired when it comes to dealing with problems and constraints. Still, there are certain problems in life that cannot be solved with a smile and a sunny disposition. Many of the problems that come before us best can be solved with gamer psychology and game-based strategies. When we want or need something and cannot easily get it, we sometimes play a game of life called negotiating. And in negotiating, two or more people have a conversation aimed at reaching an agreement on some course of action. The gamer thinker's approach, even in negotiation, that is most basic and most effective, is simply to write down the pros and cons on a notepad. Simple lists can help us to define, recognize, and isolate these constraints. And they also help decide whether it is best to remove the constraints or compensate for them or even build around them while developing winning game strategies. Some obstacles and constraints can be addressed more easily than others through a combination of intuition and logic rather than just logic alone. Some people have a sixth sense that enables them to recognize the subtle patterns that create and reflect unique and subtle constraints. This sense often creates a balancing act for a game thinker between mind and heart. With practice, this balancing act will make you a more skilled life gamer. The reason why I say that is simply being logical or rational is not going to help you, because people are emotional creatures, and your ability to create rapport with other adversaries or people that are involved in a competition with you will give you tremendous power that you cannot get just from logic or rationality. And a lot of this comes from reading nonverbal cues too, I might add. One of the game changers for me was video games. There are a number of ways that recreational games and puzzles have changed since the 1970s, and these changes have influenced how we strategize in life. Three of the most important changes were the invention of Rubik's Cube, the introduction of graphic user interfaces, and the introduction of video games. The Rubik's Cube puzzle is key to understanding game theory. It was invented in 1974 by the Hungarian sculptor and architect Erno Rubik. And though it was not explicitly invented for children, it can be played by children or adults. Rubik's Cube was so easy to understand that a 7-year-old was capable of taking on the challenge, and so tricky that many mathematicians were stumped. It was the perfect puzzle for a young person with strong intuitive and reasoning skills. Not only had the cube captivated the attention of children all over the world, but it integrated the skills a young person developed when playing simple games and puzzles. And these skills could be applied to solving both very simple and complex puzzles, the kind of problems they would deal with later on in life. After the invention of Rubik's Cube, video games arrived. Then graphic user interfaces used on Apple computers came into vogue, leading to Microsoft icons and the apps now used on smart devices. One of the great breakthroughs in video gaming was the development of home consoles. Now one could generate visual feedback on a video device, such as a TV screen or a computer monitor. This was revolutionary. Children now played, interacted with their environment, and developed or did not develop gamer thinking and advanced social skills. Today, there are many socially interactive video games and ways to connect with others through social networking and smart devices of every type. These are all tools that are useful developing skills in gamer thinking. Most video gamers are never informed that the skills used here could be used to succeed in the game of life. Now, most of what we successfully do in life requires the very same game playing skills we needed to play correctly in a sandbox. It is common sense to understand when discussing gamer thinking in adults that these game habits all go back to childhood. As for personal effectiveness, many young video gamers already have many of the essential skills they will need to succeed in the game of life. All they will need to do is transfer these same skills from recreational gaming to life gaming. It has been shown that action video game players have greater efficiency than non-players in the following areas. high-hand coordination, hand-eye coordination, visual motor skills, resistance to distraction, sensitivity to information in their peripheral village, and vision, and other things. So these are the kind of skills that they are going to need in their lives. Researchers have found that enhanced abilities could be acquired by training with action games involving challenges that switch attention between different locations, but not with games requiring concentration on single objects. A few studies have even suggested that online offline video gaming can be used as a therapeutic tool in the treatment of different mental health concerns. It seems that video games, though adults say poo-poo or they think that they're a waste of time, that these video games really demand more from a player than traditional board games. Rather than thinking like a one-dimensional robot, for a player to experience a video game fully, they must first determine the objectives as well as to how to complete them. These are the very issues we run into in daily life. Players of video games then learn the game controls and how the human-machine interface works, including menus and the heads-up display or status bar. This is the method by which information is visually relayed to the player through the game user interface. So, beyond such skills which after a while become fundamental and are taken for granted by many players, video games are based upon the player navigating and eventually mastering a highly complex system with many variables. Many video games require a strong analytical ability as well as flexibility and adaptability, the right skills anyone would need to succeed and prosper in a highly competitive world. Some research suggests video games may increase a player's attention capabilities and thus be a useful tool for educating easily bored individuals who seem to have some of the symptoms related to ADHD or short attention spans. This is because gamers often adopt an attitude while playing that is of such high concentration and hyperfocus that they do not even realize they are learning. If the same attitude could be adopted at school, students would enjoy significant benefits. They would be learning by doing while playing video games, modeling the skills of other gamers, and expanding their own creative and innovative skills. Video games have also been proven to raise self-esteem and build confidence. These games offer people an opportunity to do things that they cannot do offline and to discover new things for themselves. So, video games are great. And of course, there are some valid criticisms of them. Some games are incredibly violent. They promote unethical and antisocial behavior. But of course, the same can be said for joining a college fraternity or watching fistfights in professional hockey. Despite some adverse media reports directed towards video games, certain studies indicate that they likely have value in terms of academic performance. And in many video games, you must solve a puzzle to move to the next level. And that involves using general knowledge and skills in mathematics, reading, and science. So to finish off here, what I want you to know is that studies show that there is a link between video gaming and higher score rates and more productivity, more precision, more effectiveness. And for students, higher math and science scores. The question researchers ask is, were the higher ratings the result of playing games? Or could it be that quick-witted kids are looking for a challenge they don't find on social media or from skateboarding? Ultimately, if you want to be effective in the world today, in a new digital economy and globalization and in social media, the more skills you have in game psychology and gamer thinking, the more effective you're going to be. Applied game theory is an essential skill more than ever. And I really recommend deeply that you learn about it, you watch these recordings, and also, if you like, we have a course on how to become a master game theorist and applied game thinker. And you can learn more about that by going to AskLewis.com. Thanks a lot for listening. I hope you will subscribe to this channel at Ask Lewis Harrison. Join our mailing list at Ask Lewis. Like our page, our fan page at Facebook, and also become my friend at Lewis Harrison on Facebook. Thanks a lot for listening, and have a great gamer day.